Before we dive into the story, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment if you're ready to see how far humanity can push the galaxy's limits, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters. Now lean in. This isn't the kind of story the Council wants you to hear. This is the one they tried to bury. The silence after a massacre is the kind that makes planets tremble. Hours before, a full expeditionary fleet had filled the skies over Echelon Prime. Now, only scorched hull fragments drifted like black snow. Ships built to erase civilizations had been undone in 12 minutes. No survivors. No transmissions. Just the lingering residue of something far older than war itself. In the Galactic Council chamber, the lights burned a clinical white as commanders, analysts, and politicians murmured like panicked birds. No one wanted to say the name out loud, but eventually someone did. Shroud beasts. The words carried weight, centuries old and layered with dread. A species that appeared only during war. Unseen until too late. Armies fell and the creatures vanished, leaving nothing but stories and ash. While alien strategists tore through battle data, chasing ghosts through sensor logs, they never thought to look at Earth. Not once did it occur to them that the same monsters they feared slept in the shade of trees, curled at the edges of quiet human villages, with children playing on their massive paws. Captain Elias Ward watched the largest of them now. The creature's breath came in slow, thunderous waves, chest rising like a hillside. Its hide shimmered like night armor beneath the morning sun. A child balanced on its flank, poking its ear with a stick. The predator rumbled, not in threat but in what could only be described as indulgent annoyance. Elias leaned against a fence post, arms crossed, his uniform's collar unbuttoned. Most people in the galaxy saw these things as death given form. To him they were simply neighbors. Dangerous neighbors, yes, but ones who understood a handshake better than a leash. He had long since learned not to order them. No one ordered them. You asked. And if they liked you, they listened. Behind him, a tent flap slapped in the breeze, and Kai Rourke emerged with a datapad under one arm and a mug of something too bitter to be called coffee. His lab coat was wrinkled, his hair in full rebellion, and the faint burn marks on his sleeve suggested another failed attempt at scanning the creature up close. They don't like scanners, Elias said without turning. Kai squinted against the sun. They don't like anything that hums. Or beeps. Or thinks it's clever. Which is why I can't get baseline vitals on something the size of a gunship. Do you realize what that does to my research credibility? They sleep in my village, Rourke, Elias replied. I think credibility's already off the table. Kai stepped closer to the fence, gaze locked on the predator. It's incredible though. Their species wiped out empires. They hunted fleets. But here, he gestured toward the children, they let toddlers braid their ear tufts. They're not weapons, Elias said. They're choosing to be here. Big difference. A low whistle echoed through the village. An old woman shuffled by with a basket of fruit. She didn't flinch when the creature shifted, its massive tail sliding across the grass like a fallen tree. She only patted its flank with the kind of casual familiarity most people reserved for a house cat. Elias had seen seasoned soldiers freeze up at the sight of these predators. Here they barely earned a glance. Do you ever think about why? Kai asked softly. Why? They could have wiped Earth off the map if they wanted. Hell, they could still do it. Elias exhaled slowly. I think about it every damn day. What neither of them saw, at least not yet, was the faint silver shimmer above the treeline. An alien reconnaissance drone, silent and patient. Someone was looking. Someone was finally getting close. Council chatter's heating up, Kai went on, swiping through his datapad. Echelon Prime's gone. They're saying it was the beasts again. If they figure out the creatures are here. They won't, Elias interrupted. You don't know that. I do, Elias said flatly. Because if they come here, they're not just going to find the beasts. They're going to find us. And we're not handing over anything. The predator stirred then, lifting its massive head with a slow, deliberate motion. Its eyes, twin gold embers, swept across the horizon. Something about the air shifted, too subtle for human ears but not for it. The children fell quiet. Birds scattered. Elias straightened unconsciously. Even at rest, its presence bent the world around it like gravity. Kai lowered his voice. It senses something. Yeah, Elias murmured. I feel it too. The creature's gaze lingered on the sky. Then, with a sound that might have been a sigh, or a warning, it lowered its head again and closed its eyes. The tension melted, like a storm choosing not to break. Elias forced his shoulders to relax. But the message was clear. Something was coming. A voice called from across the square. Lieutenant Ochoa jogged over, tablet in hand, sweat streaking down his temple. Sir, we've picked up a long-range distortion. Not standard freight. This looks military. Elias felt the weight of the words before Ochoa even finished. He glanced once at the predator, sleeping in the sun. At the children laughing again. At Kai, whose expression had already shifted from curiosity to concern. Time? Elias asked. 17 hours out minimum, Ochoa said. Maybe less if they're burning hot. Kai swore under his breath. 17 hours before the entire galaxy finds out humanity's been hosting living WMDs. They're not WMDs, Elias repeated. They're family. Kai shot him a look. Try telling that to the Council fleet. Elias turned his gaze back to the horizon. The predator's tail flicked lazily, but he knew better than to be fooled by appearances. These creatures didn't tolerate threats. They erased them. And if the Council forced a confrontation, the galaxy would learn a lesson it wouldn't soon forget. Prep the perimeter, Elias ordered. No weapons raised. Not yet. Let's see how stupid they want to get. Ochoa nodded and jogged off. The predator's ear twitched as if it understood every word. Probably did. Kai hesitated, then asked the question that hung like smoke over the camp. And if they don't back off? Elias met his eyes. Then they'll find out what kind of world these monsters chose to protect. The sun dipped lower, washing the fields in copper light. The children climbed off the predator's back, and the massive creature shifted into a deeper, heavier sleep. Elias stood in the growing shadow of something the galaxy feared, something he'd grown to trust. 17 hours. That was all the time they had before the peace in this forgotten corner of Earth ended. And somewhere beyond the sky, a Council fleet drew closer, armed and certain they were the apex of the galaxy. They had no idea what waited for them. The first tremor of the alien vessel's descent rippled through the valley just after dawn. Birds fled the trees in swarms, their cries sharp against the dull thrum rising from the sky. By the time the villagers stepped outside, the clouds were splitting open, sunlight scattering off the dark hull of a ship that didn't belong on Earth. Its shadow stretched across the fields like a blade. Captain Elias Ward stood at the edge of the square, shoulders set, hands clasped behind his back. He watched the alien dropship settle into the dirt road like a predator claiming territory. Its landing struts dug into the ground with the precision of a scalpel. No dust stirred, Council ships never left anything as messy as dust. A door hissed open, and figures emerged, tall and lacquered in armor that gleamed like obsidian. Their helmets caught the light, faceless and unreadable. Kai Rourke stepped up beside him, squinting against the brightness. That's a Council Vanguard ship. They didn't come to talk. They'll say they did, Elias murmured. They always say that. At the head of the alien delegation was Commander Vellner, a figure Elias recognized from dozens of grainy transmissions over the years. The Qatari leader moved with deliberate, rehearsed calm. His people were built for war, long-limbed, sharp, unsettlingly graceful. When he spoke, his translator collar coded every word in cold precision. Captain Ward, Vellner said, his helmet retracting with a soft click to reveal a long, predatory face. You've been a difficult man to contact. Elias kept his tone neutral. You don't need an invitation to land a warship on someone's farm, apparently. This is not a warship, Vellner replied, though his soldiers fanned out behind him, rifles slung but ready. This is a diplomatic vessel. Diplomats don't arrive in stealth orbit, Kai said. Vellner's eyes flicked to him, unamused. And scientists don't hide weapons capable of annihilating fleets. The statement dropped like a hammer. Elias didn't flinch. You'll have to be more specific. Vellner took a step forward, the air between them tightening. Echelon Prime was destroyed. 12 minutes. A fleet of 7 capital ships. You know what did it? The entire Council knows what did it. And we've tracked the resonance signatures here. The villagers had gathered along the fences now, quiet, watchful. A few of the children peeked from behind door frames, unaware of the kind of storm standing at their doorstep. In the field beyond the square, the massive predator lay in the grass, unmoving except for the slow, steady rhythm of its breathing. Its flank rose and fell like the tide. We're not hiding anything, Elias said. They're not ours. Then surrender them, Vellner said. For the safety of the galaxy. Kai barked out a dry laugh. You think they belong to anyone? Commander, if you try to take them, you're going to find out what that really means. A few alien soldiers raised their weapons slightly at his tone, but Vellner didn't react. His voice remained smooth, almost rehearsed. You misunderstand. This isn't a request. It's containment. If you cooperate, Earth will be spared any unnecessary escalation. The Predator's ear twitched. Its golden eyes opened just enough to fix on the figures in black armor. The soldiers froze instinctively, as if some primal part of them recognized they had just been seen by something that had killed their kind before. It did not move further, but its gaze was enough to unravel the council's carefully built composure. Elias noticed it, the half-step back, the quickened pulse, the subtle recoil in their formation. Even the Qatari, engineered for fearlessness, had not outgrown their evolutionary memory of apex hunters. He let the silence stretch. "This is a farming village," Elias said at last. "You storm in here with soldiers, point guns at people's homes, and you think these creatures won't react? You don't understand what you're standing next to." Vellner's mouth tightened, a crack in his composure. "They're monsters. You've just made them tame." "They're not tame," Elias said evenly. "They trust us." A thin line of tension carved through the air as one of the younger alien soldiers shifted, his hand brushing the grip of his weapon. The Predator rose to its feet without sound, muscles rolling beneath night-black hide, a living shadow shaking off the morning sun. Gasps rippled through the alien ranks. It moved slowly, deliberately, padding closer to the fence with a grace that defied its size. It didn't growl. It didn't need to. The children didn't scream. One of them, a girl with a sun hat too big for her head, trotted up and wrapped her arms around its foreleg. It glanced down at her, blinked once, and lowered its head until its chin touched the earth beside her feet. The alien soldiers took another step back. Vellner's voice wavered just slightly. "That thing destroyed a fleet." Elias didn't smile. "And now it's letting a child braid its fur. That should tell you something." For the first time, uncertainty cracked through the Qatari commander's carefully cultivated menace. Kai watched him like a hawk, noting every twitch, every falter. "You don't have control over them," Vellner said finally. "Neither does anyone else," Elias replied. "That's what terrifies you, isn't it?" The sky hummed. Above them, the low-orbiting ship adjusted position, casting a sharper shadow over the village. More were coming. Vellner's eyes flicked upward briefly. His hand clenched at his side. "I'll give you until sunset to hand them over. If not, the council will escalate." Elias inclined his head, expression unreadable. "Then I guess we'll see who survives sunset." Vellner's soldiers withdrew in rigid formation, but their perfect rhythm was fractured now, just slightly uneven. They boarded the vessel without another word. When the ramp sealed shut, the ship lifted, hovering a few meters above the field, not leaving but watching. Kai exhaled the breath he'd been holding. "They're not going to wait for sunset." "I know," Elias said. "They're bringing a fleet." "I know that too." Kai scrubbed a hand over his face. "You've got 36 villagers, 2 perimeter drones, and a fence that was built to keep out deer, not council armor." Elias glanced at the Predator, now lying calmly in the grass again, the little girl asleep against its side. "And them?" Kai shook his head. "That's not a defense plan. That's a miracle waiting to fail." "No," Elias said quietly. "That's trust. And it's older than the council." The ship above shifted slightly, its shadow crawling across the fields like a dark tide. The Predator's ears twitched again, and this time, its gaze followed the sound. It was aware. So was Elias. This was no longer about diplomacy. The countdown to war had already started ticking the moment the council touched down. Kai looked toward the sky and whispered, "They're going to find out what happens when they corner something they don't understand." Elias didn't answer. He just stared at the horizon, where the light was already dimming under the weight of the ship. Whatever came next would either shatter this village or burn a truth into the galaxy that no one could ignore. And when sunset came, neither side would leave unchanged. The night air tasted of iron and quiet dread. The council ship hovered above the valley like a black star, its underbelly pulsing with slow, deliberate light. Every villager could feel it pressing down, a weight that made even the crickets fall silent. Elias Ward walked the perimeter with his hands tucked behind his back, the crunch of gravel under his boots the only sound breaking the stillness. He wasn't a man easily rattled, but tonight the silence felt different, heavier, intentional. In the small field laboratory, Kai Rourke crouched over a cluster of flickering monitors, sweat streaking his forehead despite the cool air. Lines of alien script and human translation scrolled past in relentless streams. He had been digging through the council's old archives for hours, bypassing layers of locked data the way some people peeled fruit, clean, practiced, a little reckless. And there it was. "They were made," he whispered. Elias stepped through the lab's plastic curtain, brushing away a low-hanging light. "What?" Kai didn't look up. They weren't born. The predators. They're engineered. He tapped the screen, enlarging an image. A schematic, jagged with age, showing a skeletal frame wrapped in muscle and armor plating. This isn't natural evolution. They were built by the Althari Dominion, 2,000 years ago. The Council's been fighting their ghosts without understanding them. Elias leaned in. The diagram showed the creatures in their war state. Spines like blades, sensory nodes that could track movement through vacuum, jaws strong enough to shear through battlecruiser hulls. They were perfect apex weapons, grown to dismantle fleets, to terrorize entire civilizations. But the image on the screen was cold, clinical, monstrous. It wasn't the same creature sleeping in the fields outside with a child curled against its ribs. Then why are they here? Elias asked. Why us? Kai swiped through more files, breath quickening. The Althari used them to dominate every enemy. But after the war, the predators turned on their masters. Not out of rage, out of something more primal. They stopped fighting when the killing stopped. They walked away. And the Althari tried to leash them again. That didn't end well, Elias guessed. Kai gave a humorless laugh. The Althari went extinct. Council records never say how, but if I had to guess, it was fast. No control protocols worked. No cages held. The predators vanished into the void, and everyone learned the same lesson. Don't look for them. Don't get their attention. But we did, Elias said. Kai's voice softened. No. We didn't hunt them. They came to us. That's the difference. Outside, a faint rumble echoed through the ground. The predator nearest the lab stretched its wings, shaking loose dust and dew. It wasn't agitated. It was listening. Elias could feel the pressure of its presence even through the tent walls. A quiet, steady pulse, like a storm gathering in its sleep. I ran behavioral models, Kai continued. Their aggression responses dropped to zero in the presence of unarmed life. But only human life. Not Qatari. Not Althari remnants. Something about our neurological patterns. Maybe it's empathy. Maybe it's just something we don't understand. But they bonded. Elias stared at the screen, then at Kai. You're saying we didn't tame them? We fit something they've been looking for. Exactly. A sharp crack split the night. The perimeter fence flickered, then went dark on the eastern line. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed his rifle and pushed through the flap. A pulse beacon flared on the horizon, a clean, controlled burst. Not an accident. A test. The Council was probing their defenses. Lieutenant Ochoa sprinted up, breath harsh. East fence tripped. No breach yet, but they're scanning everything. Let them, Elias said. They're not ready for what they'll find. Ochoa hesitated. Sir, we can't fight a fleet. You know that. Elias didn't answer. He was staring at the predator now, its silhouette rising against the pale light of the ship above. It wasn't a beast, it was a storm waiting for permission. Back in the lab, Kai continued pulling up archives, following threads no one had dared follow in centuries. Buried beneath layers of redacted Council reports, he found the moment of first contact. Not between predator and soldier, but between predator and farmer. The old footage was grainy, shaky, filmed from a helmet cam. A wounded predator had crashed into a wheat field, bleeding, its chest rising in labored gasps. A single human approached, no armor, no weapon. Just hands outstretched. The predator didn't attack. It leaned forward. And for the first time in recorded history, something designed for war chose not to fight. Kai sat back, pulse hammering in his throat. We didn't win them, he whispered. We were accepted. Elias returned, gravel dust still clinging to his boots. They're not attacking tonight. No, Kai said. But the Council will. They'll push until something breaks. And when it does, these things won't hold back. Elias folded his arms, gaze locked on the predator outside. Then maybe that's what they need to see. Kai turned sharply. You can't mean that. If they unleash fully, the entire valley could be wiped out. You've read what they're capable of. I've seen what they're capable of, Elias replied. And I've seen them choose not to use it. The predator lifted its head again, eyes glowing faintly like gold trapped beneath glass. It wasn't restless anymore. It was aware, awake. And for the first time, Elias realized the creature wasn't just responding to the Council's threat. It was waiting for his decision. They're not weapons, Kai, Elias said quietly. They're our allies. Not because we control them. Because they decided we're worth standing with. Kai's voice dropped to a whisper. And if we get it wrong? Then we burn together. The lab lights flickered as a fresh signal swept across the valley. The ship above reoriented, its engines growling softly like a throat clearing before a strike. The countdown had shortened. Velner wasn't bluffing. Kai shut off the monitors and turned to Elias. We can still hand them over. Maybe they'll spare the village. Elias didn't move. You really believe that? No, Kai admitted. But it's an option. Elias looked past him through the translucent wall of the lab. The predator stretched its wings fully for the first time since the council arrived. It was not a creature that submitted. It was a creature that remembered. Then we don't give them anything, Elias said. Not the predators. Not our home. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the low hum of the council's engines through the valley. The predator raised its head to the sky and released a sound that wasn't quite a roar, more like a deep, resonant note that vibrated through the air, into the soil, into bone. The other predators answered from the dark tree line, their voices rolling like thunder gathering at the edges of the world. Kai swallowed hard. They're not waiting for the council anymore. Elias felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. No. They're waiting for us. The note faded, leaving the night suspended on a knife's edge. Above, the alien ship pulsed brighter, engines primed. Below, the ground itself seemed to hold its breath. And between them, humanity stood, not with chains, not with fear, but with something the galaxy had never understood. The first missile streaked across the valley just before sunrise, slicing the darkness with a sound like a god drawing breath. Elias Ward saw the flare before he heard the impact. The ground convulsed, soil leaping into the air as the blast hit a half-kilometer from the village perimeter. Not a direct strike, an opening shot. A warning. The kind bullies give before they break your ribs. Council fleets in low orbit, Lieutenant Ochoa shouted, running up the ridge. His voice was sharp, already hoarse. 4 destroyers, 1 carrier and a ground assault wing on standby. This isn't containment anymore. Elias didn't answer immediately. He was standing at the fence line, watching the predator closest to the impact site lift its massive head. Sunlight bled through the fog, catching on the creature's hide like molten metal. It exhaled once, slow and steady, then rose. Not alarmed. Not panicked. Ready. Behind him, Kai Rourke stumbled out of the lab tent, pulling on his jacket with shaking hands. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't built for battlefields. But he'd learned to stop flinching when the earth growled. They're escalating fast, Kai said. This isn't a show of force. This is prelude to slaughter. They're trying to scare us, Elias said. They think we'll panic and hand over the predators before the real attack. Kai barked a short, bitter laugh. Then they don't know us. Above the valley, the council's carrier broke through the low cloud ceiling like a blade through silk. Its hull shimmered with containment fields, its landing bays already yawning open. Dropships hung inside like arrows in a quiver. On the ground, soldiers in black armor fanned out from the tree line, Qatari shock troops, their movements precise and predatory. They carried pulse rifles meant to burn through hull plating. Against villagers it was overkill. Elias climbed the watchtower, raised his comm and spoke evenly. Perimeter teams, stay cold. No shots unless they fire first. I want them to be the ones who light this match. A predator's rumble rolled across the valley like the opening chord of a storm. It wasn't a roar, more like a low, resonant growl that pressed into every chest, a sound older than any starship. The Qatari soldiers froze for a fraction of a second. Instinct trumped training. That hesitation was everything Elias needed to see. Velner's voice came through the council's open channel, calm and too controlled. Captain Ward, you've had your time. This is your final opportunity to surrender the beasts. After that, the council assumes command. Elias keyed his comm. You can't command what doesn't answer to you. Silence on the line, then Velner's voice hardened. Then we'll kill everything that does. The first dropships broke formation and screamed toward the ground. The predators didn't wait for orders, they didn't need them. The largest one surged forward, wings cutting through the air with a sound like tearing fabric. The downdraft alone flipped a council troop carrier on its side. The second predator followed, tail lashing against the soil and sending a shockwave through the enemy line. The aliens opened fire in disciplined volleys, but the beams glanced off the predator's armored hide like pebbles against a cliff face. Elias slid down the ladder and ran to the barricades. Ochoa, get the villagers under cover. Anyone who can shoot on defense lines 2 and 3. No one engages without coordination. The ground shook again, this time not from missiles but from the predator's charge. They moved with terrifying grace, massive bodies flowing through the grass with precision that made starships look clumsy. One vaulted a trench, landing squarely among a squad of Qatari, its claws flashing once. The soldiers scattered, but the creature didn't pursue. Instead, it planted itself like a wall between them and the village. "They're defending," Kai breathed, watching through the field monitors. "They're not hunting. They're protecting us." Elias crouched beside the comm relay. "Broadcast everything. Every second of this. The galaxy needs to see." Kai's fingers flew across the console. Within moments, the feed was live. Dozens of uplinks riding the pirate channels, outpacing Council encryption. All across distant star systems, millions of watchers would see the truth. The so-called shroud beasts weren't attacking civilians. They were shielding them. On the ridge, Ochoa's voice cut in. "Council heavy armor inbound. 2 crawlers." Elias's jaw tightened. "Copy. Pull the second line back. Let them overextend." The predators felt it before any human sensors did. The air pressure shifted. A keening sound shivered through the valley. One predator leapt skyward, wings cracking open like black sails. It collided midair with a dropship, shearing through its armored hull in a spray of burning metal. Flames arced across the dawn. A second predator followed suit, dragging its talons along the underside of another ship, forcing it to crash into the ridgeline. The sound was violent and perfect. Qatari troops tried to regroup, barking orders in their sharp, clipped language. But fear doesn't follow protocol. Their lines bent, faltered, then began to break. Vellner's command channel erupted with static and fury. "Contain them. Contain them." Kai leaned close to Elias, breath fast. "This isn't just a battle. This is a message." Elias didn't look away from the horizon. "Good." A crawler reached the fence line, a massive tank-like machine with plasma barrels spinning up to full charge. Before it could fire, the smallest predator slid out of the wheat fields like smoke. It wasn't the largest or most terrifying, but it was fast. In a blink, it wrapped itself around the machine's hull, dug its claws through the metal and ripped. Sparks cascaded like rain. The machine folded in on itself with a groan of tortured alloy. The villagers watching from their shelters didn't scream. They didn't cheer. They just stood in silence, eyes wide, finally seeing what their silent protectors truly were. "They're not ours," Elias said quietly, almost to himself. "We're theirs." Above, the carrier unleashed its final weapon, a cascade of orbital beams lancing toward the valley. It was too much firepower, too precise, too final. No predator could intercept it all. And then the largest one moved. It reared up on its hind legs, wings unfurling to their full span, casting the valley in shadow. The creature roared, a sound that shook the sky itself, and slammed its wings together with enough force to bend air like water. The beams fractured, scattering harmlessly across the ridges, carving trenches in the distant hills but leaving the village untouched. The roar didn't stop at the valley. It echoed through the council comms, through the atmosphere, into every lens broadcasting the fight. It was a declaration that no one could misunderstand. Vellner's voice cracked over the comm, no longer smooth. "Pull back. Pull back now." The Qatari retreated in disarray, their precision unraveling into panic. Dropships clawed for the sky, one burning, one spinning, another simply gone. Predators paced the edges of the fields, not chasing. They didn't need to. Their message had already been delivered. Elias lowered his rifle, his pulse finally catching up to him. Kai was still staring at the sky, at the retreating ships. "They didn't kill them all," Kai said softly. "They could have." "They made their point," Elias replied. In the distance, the carrier hung motionless for a long, fragile moment, as if stunned by the audacity of what it had just witnessed. Then it tilted upward and began to climb, its engines fading into the pale light of morning. The valley fell quiet again. Not peaceful. Not yet. But quiet enough to feel the heartbeat of something bigger than fear. The predators circled back slowly, returning not as conquerors but as sentinels. One of them lowered its head to the ground where a boy had been hiding. He reached out a small hand and touched its snout without flinching. Elias stood on the ridge, listening to the distant hum of retreating engines. The council had thrown its full weight at them and failed. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the balance had shifted. For the first time, the galaxy would have to face a truth it had ignored for centuries. They didn't control the apex predators. Humanity had simply earned their trust. Smoke still coiled in thin ribbons across the valley when Elias climbed the observation tower again. The wood beneath his boots was damp with morning dew, the sky streaked with pale gold and ash-gray clouds. The predators lay scattered along the ridge like living shadows, their massive forms coiled but alert. They hadn't returned to their caves. They were waiting. Watching. So were the villagers. Ochoa joined him silently, binoculars hanging from his neck. The man's face was streaked with grime and exhaustion, but his eyes were alive with something fiercer than adrenaline. "They're regrouping," he said, voice low. Elias nodded. He didn't need to ask who. The council fleet hadn't fully retreated. Far above the atmosphere, their warships floated like predators circling a wound. "Of course they are," Elias muttered. "They didn't come this far to walk away." "They're not going to use another frontal assault," Ochoa added. "That failed. So they'll get clever." Down in the village square, Kai was knee-deep in the debris of the crashed dropship, his hands blackened with soot and oil. The sight of him, civilian scientist turned reluctant resistance fighter, hit Elias with a quiet ache. Kai wasn't supposed to be here. None of them were. But war doesn't care about supposed to. "Anything salvageable?" Elias called down. Kai wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Not much. Some hull plating, scorched circuits, maybe a comm relay if I get lucky. But I found something else." He held up a palm-sized device, sleek, silver and still blinking faintly. Elias climbed down fast, boots thudding against the ladder. Ochoa followed. Kai held out the device and Elias turned it over carefully. It was a council beacon, a command node, one of the kind used to control drones or relay strike orders. "They left it behind," Kai said, voice taut. "Or maybe they didn't." Elias understood immediately. The beacon wasn't just a stray piece of tech. It was bait. "They're trying to track us," he said. "Or worse, map the predator's movement." Kai's jaw clenched. "Then we give them what they want." Ochoa frowned. "Meaning?" Elias met Kai's gaze. "Meaning we use their own signal against them." High above, in orbit, the council fleet had already begun to reposition. Vellner stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display bloom with cold precision. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped behind his back. The failure of the first assault had burned through the council like acid. Now everything depended on this last strike. "Commander," his aide said, "the beacon is active. They found it." Vellner's lips curved in a humorless smile. "Good. Let them." Back on the ground, Elias and Kai crouched inside the comms tent, surrounded by a tangle of cables, transponders and the broken remains of council hardware. Kai was soldering wires with shaking fingers, rerouting the beacon's signal. "If I do this right," he said, "they'll think the predators are gathering on the eastern ridge. Every gun they've got will point there." "And if you do it wrong?" Ochoa asked. Kai didn't look up. "Then we're already dead." Outside, the predators stirred. They felt the tension before any human words could shape it. The largest lifted its head toward the sky, nostrils flaring at some signal too subtle for human ears. Elias watched it closely. This wasn't just strategy. It was trust. If they broke that, they'd lose everything. The beacon light pulsed faster. Kai exhaled sharply. Signal spoofed. "They're buying it." Elias checked the uplink scanner. The council fleet was shifting formation again. 3 destroyers angling toward the eastern ridge, the carrier lowering into atmospheric strike range. Vellner was committing everything to the feint. He thought he was about to end this. But Elias had one final piece to play. He signaled to Ochoa. "Move the villagers to the tunnels. Quietly. No panic. We hit them fast, then disappear." "And the predators?" Ochoa asked. Elias looked toward the ridge. The creatures were already moving, not away but into the wheat fields, low and silent. As if they understood the plan without ever hearing it. "They'll be exactly where they need to be." The carrier broke through the cloud cover again, its underbelly glowing with charging plasma batteries. Dropships fanned out like black crows descending toward the false target. In orbit, Vellner leaned forward, eyes locked on the display. "Fire on my mark," he said coldly. On the ground, Elias crouched beside Kai and whispered, "Now." Kai flicked a switch. Every signal the council relied on, their drone feeds, their telemetry, their targeting data, fractured. The beacon sent back a flood of false signatures, multiplying the presence of predators tenfold. Vellner's display turned to chaos. Red markers blinked across every inch of the ridge. He was seeing an army that didn't exist. "What is this?" the aide gasped. "Jamming?" another shouted. "No," Vellner hissed. "A trap." But by then it was too late. The real predators burst from the fields like a tidal wave of muscle and steel-edged wings. They didn't roar this time. They didn't need to. Silence was their weapon now. One slammed into a dropship before it could open fire, ripping through its engines with surgical precision. Another swept beneath a plasma beam, coiling around the carrier's flank like a serpent around prey. Ochoa's defensive line opened up in synchronized bursts, targeting only what mattered: engines, wings, joints. They weren't trying to win a war. They were trying to cut the council's legs out from under it. Vellner screamed orders, but his fleet was flying blind. The false signals made it impossible to know where to strike. Beams lanced harmlessly into empty fields while predators dismantled the council's attack wing piece by piece. It was too fast, too coordinated, too human and inhuman at the same time. On the ground, Elias pushed through the smoke, rifle raised. A squad of Qatari soldiers tried to flank from the west, but a predator intercepted them, not with claws, but by slamming its tail into the ground with earth-shattering force. The soldiers scattered like leaves before a storm. Elias didn't need to fire a single shot. The battle reached its peak in seconds. The carrier tried to climb, engines screaming, but the largest predator was already above it. It landed on the hull like a living meteor, its claws tearing into alloy. With one brutal wrench, it snapped the carrier's dorsal cannon from its spine and hurled it into the mountainside. Fire bloomed in the sky, turning the morning light crimson. Vellner gripped the command rail, face pale. "Retreat," he rasped. "All ships retreat." But retreating from the apex was not like fleeing a battle. The predators didn't chase every fleeing ship. They chose one. They targeted the flagship. The air itself seemed to bow beneath the weight of the predator's dive. It struck the flagship's wing in a burst of silver fire, cutting through shields like paper. The ship spiraled, its stabilizers screaming in protest, before slamming into the distant ridge in a bloom of light and sound that drowned everything else out. For a long moment there was nothing. No shouting. No gunfire. Just the steady, ragged breaths of survivors and the low, resonant growl of creatures who had just shattered an empire's illusion of control. Kai stumbled out of the smoke, coughing. Elias caught him before he fell. "It's over," Kai whispered. Elias looked up. The carrier's wreckage burned against the horizon, a pyre the entire galaxy would see. "No," he said softly. "This is where it begins." The predators gathered around the village, not in a ring of protection, but as equals standing beside them. Ochoa joined them, shaking his head in awe. "They didn't just fight with us," he murmured. "They fought for us." Elias placed a hand on the largest predator's snout, feeling the slow, steady pulse beneath its skin. "No," he said. "They fought with us. And now the council knows it." Above, the remaining ships vanished into the black sky, their retreat a broadcast of their own humiliation. This wasn't a battle they could bury. The whole galaxy had watched. The narrative had shifted forever. As the last echo of thunder faded, Elias realized the world they'd woken that day wasn't the same one they'd lived in yesterday. The council's power wasn't absolute anymore. And the predators, those silent titans the galaxy feared, had chosen their side. Elias exhaled, the weight of it settling on his shoulders. "War's coming," he said. Kai nodded, blood on his knuckles and fire in his eyes. "Then let it come." The predator lifted its head and roared into the sky, not in rage but in triumph. It was a sound that carried across continents, across satellites, across the void itself. And somewhere far away, every power that had underestimated humanity and its unlikely allies felt the tremor. The valley burned, but it did not break.